Hey, I am so sorry for being a few minutes late. I was trying to get this conference room.
So, Brendan, you guys just you sold or you not sell? You merged with another agency there? What's going on?
We sold. We were acquired by a holding company called Plus Company, and it's like a new agency holding company, and we're about 3 months in.
Well, but I saw something today, I thought, from Jason, where you merged with another.
So within Plus Company, they owned an agency, a creative agency, 11, which was in SF, and we absorbed them. So 11.
So you spending more time out here at SF then?
I certainly hope so. I love
cool.
Yeah.
Come on out. I'll do some surfing,
guys. Let's jump in. It's so nice to have everybody here. Brendan, it's nice to meet you. I was telling Jim, I have been following you on LinkedIn for some time, and I'm like, you just post good stuff, like quality ideas about the space. Same with you, Evan. You guys are LinkedIn creator influencers, so it's good to have creators of Creator LinkedIn kind of on one of my first episodes. Well, guys, nice to have you all here, Evan, Michael, Jim, and Brendan. I met Michael because my information diet's really strict. I meet people for no reason. And when I heard that Creator DAO raised from 6 of my connections, I'm like, what is this thing? Then I cold emailed Michael and harassed him into letting me into the first cohort by pitching him on becoming an AI and software enabled creator. And I've been in the cohort, and it's been great group of folks. I met Jim because I think we met through, was it Pete Borum, Jim? Was that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Jim was one of those folks where I was pretty much off the street. I knew Pete from Forbes Under 30, and we met there. Had a great time together. And Jim was always really kind and generous with his introductions, even though he had no reason to be. So I want to thank you, Jim, and praise you in public for that. And Evan, I was telling Jim that we had met through Keith Rivers, who I was in a 2018 commercial with. I was the face of Acer in Southeast Asia for 6 months.
Awesome.
And I got along with the director. And the director is Evan's friend Keith, and we played cards together. We took Evan's money, and it was a good night. And then Brendan, I found you through Evan and Jim's kind of feed. They'd like your posts. I'm like, this is good stuff.
Thanks.
My kind of impetus for starting the show was I wanted to record conversations I would have had anyway. I mean, there's always good. Every time we have a meeting, there's always a soundbite that could help others, but no one's going to sit in our meeting if we don't know. And it was pretty clear to me that people like the all-in format, but they're all billionaires. So I don't think any of you are billionaires. I hope some of you are, but I think people need to hear a vertical specific opinion that lets them decide what they want to think faster, as opposed to hearing one freaking guy on a podcast talk for 3 hours. No offense, Joe Rogan. So I thought I'd kick it off by having one of you. We could just jump into, this is kind of a freestyle. We could just jump in by contextualizing for people who don't know, what is the creator economy and why does it matter? Let's start with Jim, the OG.
So the creator economy is the business financial side of the stuff that we all do every day, which is create. We all create videos. We all post them. We all put them out there. We all talk to other people. We might paint, we might take pictures, but we all have in essence this core of creativity. And there are enough of them. And the internet has created platforms where you can actually reach anybody around the world for free. That good creators and creators with energy and initiative are posting stuff on these platforms, and other things, entities, people, brands, etc., want to give them money so that they can put their brands in front of the people that are hanging out with the creators. So that's the beginning of it. And then it's the creators saying, well, I've got people like what I do. Let's see if I can get them to actually buy what I do or do other things. So all of the financial aspect of what sits in between communities and creators is the creator economy.
Would you add to that? Would you blow him out of the water and say he's full of it? I'm just kidding. Would you guys add to that?
He had such a good answer. He set us up all for failure. That's great. Actually, yeah.
Crickets.
I agree. No, I mean, look, to me, the creator economy is everything that's monetizable about creativity. So anything with Substack, podcasts, an artist, right? It is to Jim an expression of technology that an artist back in the day could not reach billions of people nearly instantaneously. And now because of that, they're instantaneously hugely monetizable and becoming brands within themselves.
I'm going to try for the elevator pitch format of it. People with online followings and the businesses built around them.
Easy. So there's like 7 words.
And I would just add, I just think the word enterprise, I think that, when you just creating content, it's great for the fans, but where's the enterprise value? And like, where's the business model and investment and valuations and all that behind it? So I think like the creator space was happening for a while, but building an economy around it. A lot of companies that are getting in the space have nothing to do with creating. They're providing tools for creators or ancillary software. So I just think it's enterprising the creator.
That's a good encapsulation. I would agree with all of that, even though you know more about this than I would. So I wouldn't disagree with that. Do some of you want to start off? Actually, let's start off with Brendan. Let's go clockwise. I think we're showing up on the same screen with a few intros of the folks of who you are. Brendan, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Brendan Gann. I'm a partner and chief social officer at Mechanism, which is an integrated creative agency. And I guess some context and background on me. So I've been in the creator influencer space for a long time. Did my first influencer marketing deal back in 2006. Continued to do that for a while. Agency side, started my own influencer marketing agency at one point. Sold that. Been at Mechanism ever since, and sit on the VidCon advisory board. Thank you, Jim. And active in the space, and have dabbled a little bit in angel investing and advising in the space as well.
Thanks, Brendan. Evan?
I founded Famous Birthdays in 2012, 10 and a half years ago. Kind of the IMDb for creators. I saw early that creators with millions of followers weren't on Wikipedia or IMDb. And I've been good to stay in that one lane for over a decade. So our platform's visited by tens of millions of users. And, we're kind of part of culture where people know our brand as well as they know Instagram, Snap, and YouTube, even though they only visit us for a very, very small percentage of time compared to those platforms, which I'm fine with. So,
awesome. Michael?
I'm the founder of Creator DAO, probably the biggest DAO for creators today. Before that, I was a VC that invests a lot in the creator economy. So everything from Restream, Carrot, Whatnot, Jet Fuel were all my investments back when I was a VC. And before that, I was a founder that sold my company to Google.
Well, awesome. Last but not least, Jim?
I'm currently editor and publisher of Inside the Creator Economy, which is a weekly newsletter about the creator economy. You can get to it right now on LinkedIn. About 20,000 readers a week. And maybe someday I'll sell a sponsorship so I can actually be part of the creator economy rather than just doing it for free. It's actually fun. So, and before that, helped build and run VidCon, sold it to Viacom, which is now Paramount, left a couple months ago, drove VidCon around the world as a brand. Before that, I was CEO and built the startup Revision 3, which is an early multi-channel network in the online video space, which I sold to Discovery. And then before that, I was editor-in-chief of PC Magazine, helped found a cable network about technology called TechTV. And I don't know, I'm a geek that fell into media.
Awesome.
I love the newsletter.
How is it? I haven't subscribed yet. I haven't subscribed yet. How is it?
I agree.
Yay, thanks.
Early fans. The reason I thought this was a good group, besides like the vertical specificity for everybody, was because you have people like Evan and Brendan and Jim who've been in the game 10 plus years, and you have Michael who's trying to take it 10 plus years forward. Can Jim, Michael, and Evan, or Jim, Brendan, and Evan touch on the biggest changes that have happened in your 10 plus years in the space and what you knew the world to be? And then Michael, I want you to touch on what you think the creator world will be like in 5-10 years.
I'll take a crack at it. I think one of the things that I think has been the biggest evolution is sort of like the reliance on brands. I think creators have seen sort of like the revenue pie, or a lot of creators have seen their revenue pie sort of inverted, whereas like before it was like 90%, of their revenue was brands or advertising. And with all the platforms out there and all the shared knowledge, it's like flipped for a lot of them. I mean, obviously there's discrepancies, but and that's an overgeneralization. But for a lot of creators, they've been able to leverage tools to monetize their fans directly, build great brands and build great businesses. So that's probably a great segue to sort of like Creator DAO and Web3 in general, and sort of maintaining a sense of ownership. I really think that momentum around creator-driven brands, products, and businesses is going to continue to grow.
What would you say the role of platforms is in that picture? So, I mean, the classic argument is platforms, creators. What's the third one I'm missing? You guys?
Community.
And community, right? Community seems like a newer player. Has it always been there, or is it always been about the creator and the platform primarily?
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, if we're talking about platforms like the Facebooks, YouTubes of the world, that sort of thing, yeah, that's always sort of been the backbone of it. I think what we're seeing in terms of community, while people have sort of fostered community in the general sense of like you build an audience of people who are really like fans of you, that's existed for a long time. But I think what we're seeing is sort of like these formalized platforms developing and tools to really build that direct line of communication and facilitate a community in a setting that the creator can really like own and operate and monetize to a certain degree via a lot of Web3 tools, Discords, the Discords of the world, Mighty Networks, Circle apps, etc. So I think people are realizing it's a big business. And also it's like a little bit of a hedge against sort of the ebb and flow or rise and fall of platforms and relinquishing you from sort of being totally dependent on the algorithms, which is, you're building on rented land. It can be risky. It's tough to build a following on a platform, and that is like your sole kind of way to communicate with your audience and sole revenue driver. If for whatever reason trends change, the platforms change, the sort of the floor fell from underneath you. So building a community is I think a really great way to sort of future-proof yourself in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I would say an own community there. And I will. I'm gonna go back a little bit further. In the beginning, and we'll talk about media creators, right? So if you wanted to be a media creator, you had to go to New York, LA, London, New Delhi, or Mumbai, or Sydney, or Singapore, or wherever, and the gatekeepers had to put you on. The great thing that we saw as video became something that was readily available and streamable and downloadable on the internet was that a wave of different platforms started. So you had Rever and Break and Blip and Juiced, and I could go on and on and on, even National Banana that nobody remembered, but except me. But what happened is YouTube emerged and became the winner. And so everybody flocked to YouTube. And this is what we did with Revision 3, the startup that I was running. We were hyper distributing to 30 platforms. And then a year later in 2009, 2010, we were going 100% to YouTube because it was the place. And YouTube allowed you the tools. It allowed you the ability to reach an audience anywhere in the world. It was, if not benign, it was at least not a force for bad. But over 2010 to 2015, we saw many more platforms evolve and start to come out. So Twitch carved its own niche. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did. And then other platforms as well. Facebook made lots of different, they bought Instagram and did a bunch of things there. We saw Musical.ly, which became TikTok. And now we see a profusion of platforms in different places where you can go and appeal to different types of creators. So like I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn because frankly, I'm not a dancer. I'm not a singer. I am not going to bust a move on TikTok. But LinkedIn's a great place for me. But to the end, Jed, I think I will reiterate what Brendan was saying was that none of us on these platforms own our audiences. We have new gatekeepers. Now, these gatekeepers, I think, are more benign and offer us more freedom than the gatekeepers of traditional media, but they are still gatekeepers. So what I think we're heading towards is a world where people can own their communities and own their connections, not with all of their fans, but a way to take your biggest fans and create a more meaningful economic and love relationship with them. And this is not new. I mean, Patreon's been doing this for a while. Hank and John Green started Subbable and they sold it to Patreon. But more and more, I think, as Web3 emerges, we're able to see some of the mechanisms of new economies building up that are not controlled by the platforms. And Michael knows a heck of a lot more of that than I do. So I'm going to shut up and listen to Evan and then listen to Michael talk about that.
Yeah. I think the big changes, I think one is obviously consumer adoption. Like, I grew up watching, TV and movies. And I think that today, people keep saying that Netflix's competitor isn't Disney Plus, it's TikTok. So I think that consumers like this format. They like 5-minute videos. They like 15-second TikToks. They like to communicate on Snap. They like to watch streaming. That's what drives the whole creator economy, is that this is the consumption format that consumers want for entertainment. And then I think the other two big changes are, 5G with the iPhone, just making the platform, making it fast and easy to consume. And then the third pillar, obviously, is the platforms. I think one misconception over the last 10 years is that, because initially we saw that like Friendster came and then MySpace came and then Facebook came, and it was like there was always one winner. But today, people are like, what's going to happen to Snap? Snap has 330 million daily users. Twitch has insane engagement. Twitter still is the number one news source. TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, these platforms aren't eating each other. They're just all getting bigger on their own. And I think that's because of the iPhone/5G combined with the consumer adoption. So I think that's healthy for the creator economy. I think the rent land argument is a little bit overrated, because like a lot of creators can build on 3 or 4 platforms. If anything, the platforms are going to want to give exclusive to the creators to get their best stuff on there. And I guess one other side note is that platforms want to stay away from news as well, because it's became so divisive, which is also a tailwind for creators. So yeah, I think that, that's all, helped us get to where we are.
So I want to anchor the history a little bit and just recapitulate that for the listeners. So at the network level, it was 5G, much faster data, unlimited data, etc. And at the device level, proliferation of the iPhone and mobile, and countries worldwide going from no internet to mobile first. And on the platform level, like Jem mentioned, it went from 30 plus platforms to pretty much a handful, maybe 4 to 8, I'm just guessing. And because of that, the audiences are concentrated per the platform, per the content type, per the interest. But that gives the creators risk because they have platform risks. Like most of my audience is on Facebook. And BuzzFeed saw that to the most violent effect, as a testament to their stock price and their momentum. Now, with that said, I'm thinking what Jim said, most people don't know what community is. We see this stuff every day on LinkedIn and on Twitter and on Web3. And can one of you really simply encapsulate that for folks? What are the implications of having community? And what is a community in practice to them? I think the first version of this to kind of add a tickler would be an email list, an owned community, which is what Jim mentioned. What does that look like today? And what are those implications for a creator?
One analogy I saw was really good, that there's a difference between audience versus community. Audience is like you go on TikTok, they'll watch one video because it's super entertaining, but they're not a subscriber. Not like a YouTube subscriber, they'll come back and forth. To me, like, you look at what Mr. Beast has, where he can open up a burger shop and he's not the best cook in the world, but yet there's lines out the door. That is community. Like when I see videos like that, he has truly built community. Seen somebody with, like, there's cat videos with like huge amounts of views. That cat has no following. Maybe some do, but most likely a lot of them don't, right? Like one of the most watched videos on TikTok is like a cat grabbing something, but I don't think there are other videos like do as well. And I'm sure it was a great video. But to me, whenever I think about communities, like the difference between audience, which is just pure views, versus community, which is real engagement and continuous engagement with the creator in any form they take. Right?
And you mentioned the All In podcast. Like I'm a fan of that show, and I've talked to other friends about like what happened on the episode. That's totally offline, not in comments, but we're talking about the show, about what happened last episode. That's community. Because people that know the creator, well enough to, on the bus home from school, talk about what the creator did yesterday. And I think that's, hard to get, but once it's there, it's strong.
I have to take a little bit on the whole cat side of videos. Cats can have communities. Lil Bub. Lil Bub was an amazing cat that had an amazing community built around him.
Who's Lil
her,
Bub?
I can't remember. I actually saw we actually broke the internet, I think in 2014 at the second annual Internet Cat Film Festival when we brought Grumpy Cat and Lil Bub together for the first time on stage. So cats can do it. To me, communities are about, audiences are a one-way megaphone. Communities are a two-way conversation. And if you're a member of a community, you get value internally from being a member of that community, and you get as much value from connecting with other people in the community that love the same center of that community, although it's not, it's more of a fulcrum than a center, as they do loving the creator themselves. So there is a connection between community members that you're all part of a special club that knows things other people don't know. We're geeks about it. And then the conversation with the creator who is the sort of fulcrum but not the center of the community. And that's where the power lies. That, some call it parasocial relationships, whatever. But to me, that's a community.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's like one to many. An audience will consume content around you. A community will create content around you. And you can kind of keep that flywheel going, and interest by other members of the community will keep talking and speculating, et cetera, even if you aren't there to sort of nudge it along.
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean, I'm trying to, what's challenging about what we do is we are really at the bleeding edge of stuff. Like creator economy isn't talked about at dinner tables. And so I'm trying to niche all this stuff up: tech, business, creator economy, etc. And the way I do that in this analogy, an analogy now would be just the most basic example is like a church, right? Like I'm not religious, but I grew up in religion, and people knew who the minister was, but they talked about the sermon, the lessons and stuff at the dinner table or amongst their family and friends, and the pastor didn't have to keep shoving down your throats. Something I wanted to highlight for like newer creators is what's really easy to do if you're a creator or an entrepreneur, I guess, in today's world, you're kind of both. If you want to make a living doing this, is you compare yourself to like the version 60 of another entrepreneur or another creator. What do you think would accelerate the progress or differentiate a new creator entrepreneur in today's attention marketplace that they might not get in the beginning, and that they won't get comparing themselves to a version 100 of Charlie D'Amelio or any of the other creators on these platforms?
I think it's a little bit about, leaning into your passion, because you can go hard into a niche, whether it's like a core little bit of travel or a DIY or, on LinkedIn and business, and you can still build something around you that is valuable and meaningful, which you couldn't necessarily do 10 years ago. I don't know. That's was my initial thought. Passions.
Okay. Anything else?
To me, a lot of it's being authentic. Like you see this a lot more in the creators this generation. Like the exposure. Like think about the app that's climbing the charts right now. Be Real, right? Like are they going to be Real creators pretty soon? Maybe, based on what we've seen in every other social platform. This idea of like, hey, how can we? Yeah, I've never I feel old when I think about it. Like growing up, I never would have imagined people expose so much of their lives to the public, right? Like that has never happened before. And like it is almost like you always see things move in like sort of swinging back and forth, right? Like the brands themselves don't come off as authentic. So they need to rely on the creators themselves to do that, right? And creators themselves suddenly have become sometimes bigger brands than the brands themselves, right? Like Mr. Beast Burgers is as big as McDonald's for certain kids, right? McDonald's has spent billions over the years building out a franchise, yet Mr. Beast just connects more, right? That's the audience, right? The community, the audience, he just connects more with anybody else. And that's why they buy the burgers.
Yeah, it used to be sex sells. Now it seems like authenticity sells. Like there's just so many niches, and we're so networked that there's something for everybody. Evan, you've seen kind of like the top funnel of the creators and having them, you see them, the inflection point of their careers. Do you ever talk to these creators and ask them what they're doing to kind of hit that first inflection point in their careers?
I don't talk to them per se, but I think the two things that if you got creators that do well when they're starting out, one is focus on one platform. You know I mentioned there's all these platforms, but there's just a lot of competition. The platforms make it so easy for creators to post. Now, granted, creators have to be creative and talented and work hard to post, but there's a lot of content on the platform. So, you can spread yourself thin if you try to, go on 3 or 4 platforms you're getting started. And then the other thing is a niche. Emily Mariko last summer, we saw in our data, she had like 200,000 followers on TikTok, and she put a salmon and rice dish in the microwave. And it went viral and got 60 million views. But she stayed in her lane. And if you look at her, now she has 12 million followers. That happened when she was not verified under 1 million. That's all she does now is cool food and recipe content. So her fans know her for that. The algorithms know her for that. And she's been able to grow and become a huge creator. So I think that the more the algorithms get smarter to give the community and the users what they want, the better creators are going to do if they just fine tune one niche. I do basketball trick shots wearing a suit, and that's all I do. And I think eventually your fans know you for that. I think that's what I want to do, by the way. That's what I was a creator. I want to wear a suit because I never wear a suit, and I want to do basketball trick shots. But I think if I just did that every day for 6 years, eventually I'm going to probably grow. So I think, having the discipline to stay in the niche and having discipline to stay on one platform, I think is important early on.
That's on the starting end of it. So, thank you, Evan. So on the monetization end of it, perhaps this is a question from Brendan. Do you get clients or creators who perhaps it's this Emily girl and she has these cooking videos and a cooking brand wants to sponsor her, but she wants to branch out as a creator? Do you see the diversification happening and people being interested in one creator for a special, sorry, we'll edit that, for a special interest, but being successful in multiple niches? I think that the A-grade case for this is Joe Rogan. You got comedy, you got UFC, you got podcasting, you got fitness and drugs. I mean, like different medicinal substances. I mean, that is the best case of being top decile in 5 categories. Brendan, do you see these kind of creators that are kind of category kings in more than one category, or do they have to stay in that lane to what Brendan or to what Evan was mentioning?
I don't think you have to stay in that lane. I do think it's a great way to grow, because if you come out of the gates broad, it's sort of like you can't get that community. You can't sort of get those hooks and that traction. I think you need to find that niche in that group of people that feels like this person is speaking to me in a way that nobody else is. And then that gets you the momentum. And then over time, you can sort of accelerate and layer in more depth and more verticals and categories of interest. I think Rogan, in a lot of ways, has been able to grow and be kind of a generalist. I wasn't listening to him 15 years ago or whenever he started, but he started when podcast was like, was empty. So him just being there, he was like one of a handful of people creating content, and he was already, to a certain degree, a recognizable personality. So I would imagine back then he didn't have to niche down so much. Today, I think if somebody launched and they're like, these are my 5 areas, it would almost be too broad. You would have to be like, I'm doing fighting and a subsection of fighting and a niche within a niche within a niche to get that traction. But in a way, by him being early in a new medium, that was niche enough for him to kind of build that foundation that led to his success today.
Speaking of
the analogy,
I was going to call you, Mike. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the quick analogy I look at from the startup scene is like getting to product market fit before you expand. Like there's some people just like, oh man, this isn't working. Let me switch around. But like we have product market fit. Like the same as Google, right? They're the search engine. Once they had product market fit, they could do email. They could do like any number of things, Android, everything else doing, but they didn't try to deviate. Like they were at one point in time, like they were the opposite. Yeah, right. perfect product market fit. All they had was the search button. Yahoo tried to be everything, and Google's like, no, we're going to be the best search engine in the world. They won, and once they won there, they started expanding.
Yeah, I've heard people call it content market fit, which I like.
I like that. Yeah, that's great.
Also, I think the brand's point being early, I think Rogan was early with the podcasts. I think Gary Vee's talked about, he was so early on Twitter that the suggested followers, he was always showing up, because it was like, I think if you're early, you can ride the wave of the platform. People are trying that with Be Real right now. It's obviously risky because those platforms could go away, but if they don't, you're going to end up kind of growing your graph quicker. So
yeah, that happened with Vine, right? And then whenever a platform opens, there's an opportunity.
Well, and it's interesting to see companies now starting to say, we can take you, creator, and help you go across multiple platforms as well, because there are a lot of different platforms out there. I know today Jelly Smack just launched Jelly Studios or Studio Smack or something like that, where they're actually hiring, real program producers to take your content and repurpose it across multiple platforms, which I think is smart. And that's part of the creator economy expanding and maturing, where services are cropping up to help you take advantage of these different platforms.
Yeah, I'm at two ends of the spectrum, right? It's like, I think the old world was a bit of what Jim and Evan were saying, which is there are 30 platforms, pick one, which you want to go deep on. And now it seems like the platforms emerging, there are certain local winners that I think are a huge opportunity for American creators, because they can go, I'm going to take my stuff like Mr. Beast, and I'm going to translate it to Hindi, because I know that Hindi is a big audience in YouTube, and perhaps he even goes to like the second social media platform in India. How do you guys think about localization and the world globalizing from a content perspective? Because I have the position that the world's globalizing faster than it ever has. So 2 years ago, you saw Squid Games and several K-dramas break the glass ceiling of international content on Netflix. A year ago, you saw Bad Bunny and other Latin artists crack the Billboard Hot 100 with, at any time, 46 songs in Billboard Hot 100 are not in English. Wow, that's the first time that's ever happened. And on the technological front, you see world-class teams not come from Silicon Valley. You see 1inch come from Romania, I think. You see Polygon raise $400 million from the likes of A16Z, Sequoia, and the biggest and best firms. And their team is strictly from India, their initial team. So I think globalization on the cultural front with music and TV shows and movies, and the technological front is just starting to hit that inflection point. How do you guys think about that from the content perspective?
So I think globalization is absolutely the way to go. I mean, it's Nasir Yassin Nas Daily has said this. I can't remember the exact numbers, but I heard something like 5 out of every 6 or 3 out of every 4 of the people in the world are not speaking English as their first language. And so you have this great opportunity to do that. I think the interesting thing happening with localization, which is fascinating, is we are moving from the manual process of automation, which is what Mr. Beast does, because he's been working with Unilingo and now is doing it on his own, which is basically hiring producers and voice actors around the world that will take it and revoice it in a way where it is emotionally consistent with the way that Mr. Beast did it, or PewDiePie or other people. But then there are companies like Papercup, which are able to do the translations through machine learning, AI, whatever you want to call it, where they're able to actually do it without having to hire a producer and a voice talent. And they're not ready to do it at the level of the extreme emotion of Mr. Beast, but they can do it pretty well for a lot of things. So the more that I think we see these sort of AI-assisted versions come out, and the better that it gets, the easier it'll make for this to happen globally. And I think that only offers more opportunity for creators.
I agree with Jim. I think that I was like, there's been so much investment in creator economy, and I was a little surprised it hasn't been in translation. But I think part of the reason why, to Jim's point, is that the only way to do it historically has been manually. Manual work is not as exciting for investors often.
It doesn't scale, right, Michael? You need a platform. You don't need people.
We've manually wrote 250,000 bios, so I know the hard effort in manual. But that took a long time.
Well, but if you get your audience to write them like you do now, then that's okay, right?
Well, and I think to your point, eventually with translation, as the AI gets better, which isn't there yet, there's a lot of, every day it seems like AI is talked more and more about with copywriting, with DALL-E, and video too, video as well. So I think that there will be a point where the user won't know, was this done in this translation done in AI or manual? It's not there yet. It's still better quality manual. So that's what the algorithms want, but it's not scalable. So I think eventually that'll happen where the AI is just as good as manual. So the algorithms won't care. And then there you go.
Yeah, look at what Descript is doing with voice. They're going out allowing you to train the voice, and then you can, drop in a couple of words, and it sounds pretty much like you. Now, same language, same words, but marry that with the stuff that Papercup is doing, and now you're talking about getting somewhere. It might require, entire banks of computers with NVIDIA cards in them to process it, but, with what Ethereum's going through, there's probably a couple of those available now.
Well, if we can do this podcast manually with that tool in Spanish, I would like to see.
I'm going to do that. I'm talking to a company called Resemble AI. Yeah. It's a stupid amount. It's like $20K to get it for an hour voices, but in Spanish. So it would be Brendan's and Jim's and Michael and Evan's voice, but they train it in Spanish, so which sounds freakishly. The demo they showed me was pretty impressive, but I'm like, it's a demo. It's like, is this what's it going to be like?
Well, now I want a device that I can just bring with me when I travel, so that when I talk like that, it will actually say in my voice in Spanish or other languages. That would be so cool. That's the Babelfish. Hello. Don't panic. We're only here for the fish. I'm ready, Douglas Adams. Bring it on.
Brendan, do you see cross-border deals like, it's hard not to say Mr. Beast because he's like the number one guy, but a creator who speaks Russian and he speaks English, and he's getting lots of deals from Russian companies as opposed to English companies, even though his English speaking language is perhaps a little bigger. Do you see that crossing happen, or perhaps not yet?
Yeah, I'm trying to think offhand. We've definitely done deals with creators because they've had international appeal, and we've worked with a lot of creators in other regions as part of global campaigns. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think there are multiple ways in. Sort of an interesting anecdote. I was reading an article, like Logan Paul had done an interview with BevNet. And obviously it's his brand. It's not the same, but Prime is going to be distributed in India next year, and South Africa, and Canada, the UAE. And I thought that was really surprising. I think those guys are sitting on their own audience's data. They must have some insight in terms of like what regions are smart to sort of jump into next. And like right now they're only US and UK. So there must be some rationale behind it. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's something we've only done a little bit with so far, but I think the globalization makes a ton of sense, especially when you're talking about brands like iconic brands like Coke, Pepsi that are cross-border. I mean, you see them working with, football stars that are just like globally relevant, superstar athletes that are globally relevant. I think creators are going to start getting those deals, or, like we see with Prime, the creators are just going to start making their own brands to do the same thing. And a lot won't work, but I think that we're going to see a lot of, I think 10 years from now, we're going to be surprised by the number of public companies that started out as creator brands.
Michael, do you want to speak to that? Because it seems like you're really forward-looking in that regard. You've made the bet that, I'll back up a little bit. One of the reasons I was so excited about Creator DAO, I'll name a few. Well, I'm like, Michael's invested in 34 unicorns, which I was very impressed with. My goal is 10. Okay. So I'm like, this guy's going to divert focus from being, no offense, a chill VC to like a starting company. That's really hard. And he knows how hard that is because he's seen his founders do it. And you know it before as a founder. Now you're taking the bet of creators will be a big thing. I saw it as like an intention ETF. Like I saw it as scarcity. This is to quote the book World After Capital by a partner at USV. He said that scarcity went from food to land to capital, and it'll go from capital to attention, which I fully believe, by the way. Because how much money have we sent to breast cancer and it's still not cured over the years? Like I just think it's like the mind power of of everybody collectively that'll get us to the next step in civilization. So that's what got me excited, apart from Michael with Creator DAO. Now Michael's taking the position of we're going to get all the best creators and then create a DAO. Michael, can you dumb this down for people who don't know what a DAO is? What is it? And then why that structure? Why just not a regular, VC funded company? Why not an LLC or why not like an S corp?
Yeah. To me, like if I had to summarize DAOs, it's community plus assets bank account. I had a famous recent partner simplifies Discord plus a bank account. I think Discord is simplifying a little bit. I think it's more about community. And to me, that was one of the most powerful things about the early creator economy. It wasn't people after money. It was people all trying to help each other. You hear these interviews with Mr. Beast where he's like, hey, a group of us all jump across. Like he's not looking at his competitor. He's looking at all these people collaborating to try to figure out the algorithm and get that. Right. And so to me, like crypto doesn't work if you're trying to do something so crazy that nobody understands. It works when it's taking these base assumptions that have always existed and adding technology to that. Like if you think about currency, it's always existed. And just moving to digital is something that has been in people's minds forever. It's like, hey, it should be decentralized. Like, yes, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency is super complicated, but the core concepts there have always existed, right? There's like this semi like anti-establishment point of view of the world was what cryptocurrency, and now it is the establishment, almost Bitcoin is. But in the early days, it was a couple of people were like, hey, nobody accepts this currency except me, you and me. Let me buy pizza with 20,000 Bitcoin, right? Like that was the early days. It was this kind of contrarian point of view. And to me, like there is that kind of tipping point happening too with the creator economy. There was a couple of nerdy people online. Now it's the coolest people online. It's the richest people in the world on Twitter and trolling people. Like society has shifted, and somewhere along the line, it became the most valuable thing, right? Never have we seen the richest people in the world troll on Twitter to the extent that they have, right? You see how it's like you would expect to be running companies. Like if you look at a generation of CEOs like before, like a Bill Gates and Steve Jobs compared to Elon Musk and a Mark Andreessen, they care about attention. This is what they care about. And so in some ways, the rest of the world is following their lead, and they're smart enough to see the future of the world. They're like, this is where I should be spending time on, building a public presence. And I do think like it certainly helps in everything that Elon does, that he has a massive public voice. It certainly helps Trump get elected, that he had a massive public voice, right? He was on The Apprentice. He was in front of everybody's TV screens. Like people are entertained. Like, yes, the attention, and maybe you could call it the attention economy too, is that if you can get eyeballs, good or bad eyeballs, and you're in front of enough people, you suddenly are very important. And it seems to be highly correlated with wealth too. Like it's all moving unison.
Jim, can you speak to the beginning for a little bit? I know that, so Michael mentioned in the beginning of Creator DAO, he's like, look, I've been a part of YC, I've been a part of Harvard, I've been a part of these institutions. I don't talk to the people who spoke at those institutions. I talk to people I came up with. And can you speak to the beginning of VidCon, and was it really about community? Was it about creators helping creators? In preparation for this chat, I was looking at YouTube comments, and some of the YouTube comments are like, now VidCon's more about, creator petting zoos. I'm like, that's a little harsh, but that there's a part of that could be true. And things change. I get that. But I wanted you to outline the contrast between what it was like in like the beginning phases and then for creators, and perhaps like what it is now at VidCon, and perhaps how that connects to what Michael's going for, a community-owned entity where everyone is sharing the upside.
Yeah, I'll let Brendan fill in too, because he was also, Brendan has been to almost as many VidCons as I have, and he was at the first one too. So I couldn't get him to Singapore, I don't think. Not yet, but maybe. So anyway, that's down the road. But it was a very collaborative thing. I mean, the reason why Hank and John started VidCon is they wanted a place where the creators could get together and connect with each other, because creating, it's still a very isolating thing. I mean, in the early days of VidCon and bloggers, you were in your bedroom, you were in your basement, you were talking to a camera, you were building community, but you never met the other people going through what you were going through. And you also never met your fans. So I remember at the first VidCon, and I was running an early, multi-channel network, and I had a bunch of creators part of our network, and we sponsored, and I spoke at VidCon. And by the way, if you know LA, is Century City Hyatt, which is no longer the Century City Hyatt, but that's where it was, across the street from CAA. No idea what was going to change for them. But I remember going into a room in the basement and I was like, the Nerd Fighters. I'm like, what the heck is a Nerd Fighter? And I opened up the door and it was full of Nerd Fighters. They all looked at me and I looked at them and I'm like, clearly not my community. Turned around and walked out. I think what's still the same about VidCon is you have these communities of people around the creators that are very self-referential, that know each other, that connect in person every year at these things. So in many ways, the spirit of VidCon is alive. There are a lot more creators. TikTok has changed the creator economy beyond what YouTube was in many ways. You know, the point that I think was it Evan or Michael was saying is like, you don't get, you go up on TikTok and you can get a view, but you don't necessarily build a community. But I think that a lot of the core is still the same. And I will say, and I think about this a lot, when we sold VidCon, Hank and John Green, who started it, you know, they're amazing people and give back so much to the community. But there were some creators that were hating on them because some OG creators I will not name were like, we were there at the first one and we helped build it and we got nothing out of it and you made so much money. I mean, it's like, it wasn't that much money. But I think about that and think about if we had tokens at the time, it wasn't my business, but if we did, and if we could have given every one of the first 30 featured creators at VidCon #1, 10 VidCoins, and as it grew and sold, a pot of that could end up being distributed to them. That would have solved so many problems. And so we have the opportunity now with tokenized communities and other things and DAOs and things like that to be able to build things on the backs of others, but have everybody share in the upside. And I wish I could have done that at Revision 3, the multi-channel network we ran. I wish Hank and John would have been able to do it at VidCon. Anything new, I think it's that you're building with creators, sharing the ownership, and doing it in a way that doesn't require ESOPs and doesn't require all the fundamental laws of businesses. I don't even know if you can do that. But anyway, it's a fantasy. But I think it would have helped a lot. So I kind of took your question in the out direction. But there you go.
Yeah, I the early days, I think it's sort of, I mean, you see every sort of emerging subculture become pop culture kind of follow the same general path. It's like a really small core community. And then over time, as it grows, it splinters out into subcultures within the subculture and grows and grows and grows. So there's still that sense of like community and closeness, but it's within your own niche and community. I think it's sort of like, I mean, I'm in New York. I don't know. You know, I think about like the thing I was thinking about was like punk, you know, that started whatever, like it was like the Ramones and stuff back in the day. And then now today there's Blink 182 and there's like hardcore and screamo and the straight edge groups and like all these like different genres within it that all sit under this umbrella that was basically probably, you know, 100 or so kids that, you know, started with 100 or so kids at one point in this small little area. And you could sort of look at that, like same thing with hip hop, et cetera. But at the time it was really, it was a lot of fun because it was so flat and like all these people who you'd never, to your point, Jim, like so many of these people were isolated and hadn't interacted with each other. There was so much buzz and excitement. And I think, it provided so much value to the community. And I think that was like really like a tipping point in terms of like, I think consistently every year it was like people would go to VidCon and be like, oh, I have to bring so-and-so, this brand, this person on my team back here so they can see how big this is. And it kept kind of growing like that. And it served a really valuable, I think, service in growing the creator economy more broadly.
Yeah, I'm seeing a pattern. It's like, I think in tech, some VCs used to describe Silicon Valley as a sweaty basement with like people who haven't showered in 3 days, building products and just trying to start companies. And then, you know, with like you said, Brendan, with hip hop, and the example that comes to mind is like Nirvana. I mean, you know, I'm from Seattle, so I have a bias there, but like I read books about and watched documentaries about Kurt Cobain. He loved the obscurity because he could just make whatever he wanted. And it sounded like when communities are small, people just do what they want. Good stuff comes out of it. And then when it goes pop or Britney Spears, maybe perhaps it gets diluted a bit. but it seems to always start from that super small place, people helping each other.
Yeah. So one of the things I always talk about, the similarities between like startups and creators today, like back in the day, the startup scene was super small. Like the Twitch founders mentored Airbnb founders, and not because they were like, oh, we're both big deal, but literally because it was that small of a scene. Like I remember when I was starting a company 11 years ago now, it's like multiple people, like it was a group of like 80 people, 40 companies. Like there's like 3 billionaires or something in that one group of 80s. And that's an insane ratio. I mean, how many people are like, oh, 3 out of 100? You just don't see, but it was such a small scene. Like one of the 2 stories I always remember. One is like, apparently after the movie The Social Network, Stanford's like CS degrees all went up, but it was just like, and there's this one class at Stanford was the first like iPhone building class. It was like when iPhone first came out, and apparently like half the class became millionaires or something like that. Why? Because there wasn't anybody building for apps. And even if your company wasn't successful, like you're probably so early in the mobile phone era that everybody around you was so successful they give you tips. Like that is sort of the magic of it. And I think everybody in this call probably played a role in building that up. And now it's big. It's what Silicon Valley is. It's a massive industry. And again, it's funny, the creator economy, the startup scene, and crypto itself was like that. I think it was like a couple people. It's just super uncool. And now it's like Tom Brady is into crypto, right? Like who would have thought? Like it just has that kind of network effect. And that is the power of technology when things expand that quickly. But it's funny. People see these analogies between all 3 of these things and how they just become mainstream.
Yeah, it's been so fun. I wish we had more time. Like we have a couple minutes left. We'll jump off at 5. I have 2 last questions. One's a quick hit, 2-word thing. The other one is 1-sentence thing. What about the creator economy now? Because creators are really cool. They're kind of famous. I mean, like the cognitive dissonance is a bitch because you might have 4 million followers, but you can't pay rent. Like, what about being a creator now is the uncool part, is the Nirvana part, is the hip hop part, is the startup sweaty basement part that people can perhaps think about as they go on their journey about onto being or investing in creators. Because right now the noise is incredible. The noise is abundant. What do you think the signal is in terms of temperament or area or something that's really uncool that perhaps could be cool in terms of creators?
I can speak from firsthand experience. I would say that whatever the last like 2 years, I sort of have begun dabbling in. I was always behind the scenes and sort of started posting on LinkedIn and then doing TikToks. And I can tell you the uncool thing is your first time in front of the camera is brutal. Like, I think anybody who like can overcome that and continue to grow and evolve, like maybe it's easy for other people, but like for me, it was like you had to be okay with the fact that like there's a very good chance nobody's going to see it, nobody's going to care, or even worse, maybe people see it and they hate it, and like making that leap is not fun.
Psychological leap.
At least for me, it was not. It was like that 0 to 1 is brutal.
Evan, you want to touch on that?
I think that I don't really know what is brick. I haven't followed LinkedIn doing creating, but I think obviously it's very hard. I think a misconception, like how hard it is to grow. Like getting 1,000 followers is really hard. Getting 10,000 is extreme. It's much more hard to get 10,000 followers organically often than once you go from 10K to 100K, so forth. So I think that's hard, is just growing. There's so many creators on the web, and there's so many platforms. I do think to flip that, one cool thing about being a creator is it's good marketing and social media and experience. I do think a lot of creators, if they don't do creating full time, they go to corporate America. If 2 people are applying for a job and one person kind of does social media, the other person's grown to 23,000 followers, they've learned a lot about marketing and social media and attention and conversions and all of that and brand building. So I think that's a flip side to it, that you're getting good experience. Like when you have to make a TikTok, you got to be really smart to condense a video into 15 seconds and use the right song and tag and all that stuff. So, I think that maybe some would say it's hard to be a creator and only so many can do it full time, but you are learning valuable stuff that will apply to many different companies you could work for one day.
100%.
Michael?
I look at it, and one thing is it's clearly work. Like, I think in the very early days, because there was no job, nobody could make a career out of it. So nobody even tried beyond it's like, I made a viral video, good. Now it's like, I made a viral video. I should probably follow up and create more content because I have a chance to make this a career, right? Like, because it's now a job or can be a job, it's clearly a lot more work, right? Like, you look at the early YouTube videos, they clearly, like, they weren't expecting it to take off, and there was no follow up. There's no like, okay, now we got to do. It's like, I've never seen it as career work. And two, like, I think there's now like, I'll use venture capital example. Back in a venture capitalists did not need to post on Twitter, right? The Union Square to benchmark, they pride themselves on being under Union Discourse. Now the top VCs to all act on Twitter, they got to be active on LinkedIn. It's like, now it's like, it's table stakes to have all these things. And like, yeah, it's almost a part of every single, like celebrities, right? Before they're like, hey, I'm a celebrity, just watch me on TV. Now it's like, now I got to follow your life on Instagram too. It's like, why? Aren't you seeing them everywhere? It's like, no, it's just table stakes now that your audience expects to see you everywhere. So now you have to do all these things. So to me, that's the other thing that's sort of the grimy side of being a creator is that like, yeah, it's work and now everybody has to do it everywhere else.
So Brendan said it's your first video. Evan said it's hard to grow. Michael said it's actually a job. And then what about you, Jim?
Well, I think, the key thing is just don't worry about perfection, particularly as you get started. Just get it out there and learn and get going. No one's going to listen and watch those first videos. And if you feel like, oh my God, I don't know, go to some of your favorite creators on YouTube. And if they haven't deleted their first video, take a look at it. You'll feel a heck of a lot better.
Okay. Last question. It's a one word answer. I'm a creator and it's a broad question. I'm a creator and I want to put all my chips on one of these emerging trends. Where do I put all my chips? Live streaming, short form, or localization? Brendan, you want to start?
Yes. Gosh, I would say live streaming. I think the reason being, I feel like it's a great way to build a direct line, build that like Jim referenced earlier, the parasocial bond, the relationship. It's a way to sort of build that deeper connection. Because people are spending more time with you. And it seems like that's the arena that platforms are really starting to invest in and double down in. We see Amazon launching, live commerce on their homepage. TikTok has been pushing it heavily. All the platforms are getting into it. So it seems like that's an arena that I think is sort of going to be the next wave.
Evan?
I'd say short form, just because, YouTube's obviously created the most, has made the creator economy initially with their rev share program and their series about shorts, and obviously TikTok, and then, Instagram, Reels they've said is important. And then Snap launched like their Spotlight. So I just think short form is here to stay. And, I think that's where I would start.
Michael?
I'd say live streaming only because I think there's tech tailwinds, right? Like before you couldn't, like the technology wasn't there, the connections weren't that stable. So like whenever I look at platform shifts, it's usually because there's some technology behind it that leads to it. It's something like now is the time. Right?
And Jim?
Like you couldn't start TikTok 10 years ago. I mean, the connections were like you can download one video.
Jim's going to say option D, VR.
No, I'm going to jump in on localization because nobody else has, because I fundamentally believe, look, it's a big world out there.
Split pot. Wow.
If you just stick to one language, there's so much opportunity all around the world. Everybody is online or will be online, and you can connect with people globally. So why wouldn't you do that?
I agree. What's to say Charlie Bit My Finger wouldn't have been more funny in French, Who knows? Guys, this is a ton of fun, and thank you all for joining. I will send you all the copy of everything, but I learned a ton. I hope the audience learned a ton too. This is going to be episode 1 or 2, so we make this an NFT, and hopefully we were something someday. But I appreciate all of you for joining. It means a lot to me.
Thank you for putting this together.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Good seeing you again, Brendan. Take care, Jim.
Good seeing you.